Hello, everybody. This is Byron Lehman, and excuse me. This is the Jittery Goat YouTube channel. I also have a website. It's entitled The Jittery Goat, and you'll find it at jitteryg.com. That's where you'll find my short stories as well as links to my novels on Amazon. So if you have an opportunity, please go over to the website and also go over to the Amazon account and take a look at my novels. I think you'll find something there you like. There's a large variety of novels. I think I have 21 or 22, if I'm not mistaken. Before I get started, I want to remind everyone to please put your comments in the comments section. I appreciate any criticism or any commendation you might have coming my way. Also, if you would, hit the subscribe button, please. And also, I'd like to mention that the short story I'm going to review here in just a moment, you'll find a link to that in the description section of this video. So the short story I'm going to link you to is entitled The Defeat of Eddie Fishbones. And just to describe him a little bit, Eddie Fishbones he's a pull shark. He's a good stick. He's a hustler. And it takes place in Chicago. And interestingly enough, I wrote this story about 25 years ago, but right now I'm working on a short story, or on a novel rather, and it's just pretty close to being done. And the working title was Chicago, and I mentioned that in a previous video. But I decided to name it Once Upon a Time in Chicago. Now, it may change if there's another novel named that. But there's a kind of a pool hustler that shows up in this novel too, and I don't know, it's not necessarily based on the same person, kind of, because I had him in mind. I had Eddie Fishbones in mind when I developed this character in the novel, and I call the character in the novel Once Upon a Time in Chicago. I call him Pocket. So as I mentioned, Eddie Fishbones is a pool hustler, and money is the only object with him. And they always set up unwitting souls, play a game of pool for penny ante money, and he lets the sucker win and lets the sucker win the next game, and next thing you know, the pot is getting bigger, and then when the pot really gets big, all of a sudden this average pool player, Eddie Fishbones, becomes a really good pool player. And so what a terrible way to make a living when you think about it. But however, I think that maybe all businesses are built that way, as they kind of, with advertising, they kind of suck you in and then sock it to you. And so we're all unwitting souls to one extent or another. However, I think with a lot of short stories, what I like to do, I try to find the good in people, no matter how they are. I think that even the villains have, when you develop a villain there, you have to show some humanity with them in some way. You have to find some way to like them, or have the reader like them. And Eddie Fishbones is really there's a sensitive and feeling side to him. So you'll have to read the short story to find that out, okay? And look for the sensitive and the feeling side of Eddie Fishbones, this pool hustler. Now, where did this story come from? Well, I think at the time I wrote this short story, which is probably 25 years ago, at least, at least that long ago. I was listening to some audiobooks on tape where I worked at, and while machines are running and you're doing routine jobs, I would either listen to classical music or I'd listen to books on tape. And I happen to be listening to, I think it's Damon Runyon, who wrote some short stories, and I think it was developed into Guys and Dolls. And I don't know exactly how that worked out, but anyway, I listened to Guys and Dolls, the short stories. And the reader of those short stories, the narrator, was the actor Jerry Orbach. Now, some of you may or may not know, but Jerry Orbach played the part of Detective Lenny Briscoe in Law and Order. And what a great actor he was. In fact, there was something about, on at least the actor side of him, but also, and he's short stories I was listening to, there's something about his voice. It's a very gritty and streetwise voice type of things. And when I developed this short story, I could all I heard was Jerry Orbach reading this and telling this story. So this story, the Defeat of Eddie Fishbones, it's as if it's narrated by a guy that knows the streets, knows the neighborhood, knows the people, knows all the players. And so for the writer, I happen to think about this. Every neighborhood, and like in this story here, has the neighborhood gossip, or the one who collects all the stories. He collects all the narratives. He has a history on everybody. And you could just ask him, what about the butcher in the corner? And say, oh yeah, this is his second wife, the first wife, and it has all types of stories. And we can imagine. Sometimes can we imagine that we're the person in that neighborhood and we see everything, and we know everything that goes on in that person's life, and that becomes a story. Or else, can you imagine this? Is perhaps you know who the neighborhood gossip or the snitch is, and you go to them and you say, can you tell me about the butcher in the corner? And you listen to him. And so what you can do is write that story, you say, and from that person's point of view. And it can, thinking in that way can really develop a good short story for you. And so there's something else that I was thinking about as I got this together and thought about the short story and where it came from and so forth. There was something in that Guys and Dolls, something that Jerry Orbach read, that made me think about something, right? It didn't have to be anything very big, but I happened to think of something. It triggered a memory or a creative thought. And you kind of hold it there. And you listen to the rest of it, but you hold on to that and leave it in your mind or wherever it's at. Of course, it's in your mind. And you begin to develop that thought a little bit. Perhaps you pair it with some other thoughts that you might have or something else you've read. Now, you're not copying the story. It's based upon that. And this story here, the Eddie Fishbones, Defeat of Eddie Fishbones, is generated just really from Jerry Orbach's voice. That's it. There's something gritty about his voice. I think he could tell a good story. And so that's where it came from. So sometimes if something reminds you of something, keep that. Then there's something that reminds you of something else. Or this thing that you remember here, that reminds you from the original story, might remind you of something else, might remind you of something else, might remind you of something else. And you can put them all together for a series of short stories, or maybe for a novel. One thought or one idea can feed another, and it's like a link in a chain. So sometimes I think that's how some of my stories develop. Is one thing reminds me of one thing to another, to another, to another, and eventually becomes a story or a novel. So that's for the writer to think about, and this is just be observant, look around the neighborhood, who's the neighborhood stitch, and see things from their point of view, and maybe write about them. And so be careful not to make it too personal, or because you may have a neighbor knock on your door. So anyway, once again, I'd like to remind everyone, if they would, leave a comment in the comment section, good or bad. I appreciate either, especially the good. And subscribe if you would. Please subscribe. There's a little subscribe button down there. But also, just a reminder, the link to the Defeat of Eddie Fishbones will be in the description section. So that'll take you to the short story on my website. So remember to do good stuff, read good stuff, write good stuff, and by all means, like Eddie Fishbones, like that story there, Eddie Fishbones, Defeat of Eddie Fishbones, try to see the good in others. Okay?